Stephen Davis was born on the 27th of March 1970 in Nottingham, United Kingdom. His friends described him as a humorous guy who would tell bad jokes but his smile would make it funny. His family described him as a gentle person who wouldn't hurt a fly. Stephen had two younger sisters and his dad passed away when he was just 14 years old. Stephen's mother Margaret met Alan, who became Stephen's stepdad. Stephen and his stepdad Alan got on very well. Stephen was a bright and intelligent guy who was a bit of a computer geek. He worked for a tech company in Nottingham. On the other side of the world, Stephen's future bride Evelyn Bohol lived in the remote island of Daram Samar in the Philippines. You can only reach this island by boat and there's no electricity or sanitation. As a little girl, when Evelyn was asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" she would reply, "I want to be a bar girl so that I can marry an American." Evelyn's family described her as a good girl and that she was well behaved when she was young. She was very talkative even when she was small. Evelyn decided to leave her home at the young age of 13 to look for new opportunities. Her mum was very sad and cried when her daughter started working at such a young age. She said that Evelyn told her she had to work because the family were very poor. Evelyn headed to Angeles City, where a lot of young girls like Evelyn go to look for work. The city is known as the sex capital of the Philippines. Girls tend to work in bars as it's the best place for them to earn enough money to send home to their families. They often have to lie about their age so that they can get a job. Girls as young as 12 years of age earn £1 a night for dancing and up to £5 if they have sex with a customer. There's a premium rate for virgins who are known as cherry girls. Meanwhile, at the age of 21, Stephen got an exciting job offer in Hong Kong. A computer company promised to triple his salary if he would move to work for them in Hong Kong. His family was so supportive of him accepting the offer abroad. Once in Hong Kong, Stephen took up a new hobby. He joined a flying club in Angeles City in the Philippines, just 2 hours from Hong Kong. This is a place where a lot of professionals and expats come to party, and Stephen found himself surrounded by a lot of pretty women. Evelyn was one of the lucky bar girls whose dream of being rescued by a rich man was about to come true. Stephen happened to walk into the bar where Evelyn worked. Stephen fell for Evelyn the minute he saw her. He took her out for the night, and he even paid the bar owner £500 so that she never had to go back to work in the bar again. He told his family back in the UK that he'd met Evelyn in a bar, but they thought it was more like a pub as opposed to a brothel. Stephen's mother Margaret was really disappointed when she found out that he'd spent the night with a prostitute. Margaret and Stephen's stepdad Alan decided to make a visit to Hong Kong, which is when they met Stephen's girlfriend Evelyn for the first time. Margaret described Evelyn as a quiet and polite girl who was totally acceptable. Stephen had arranged a special surprise for everyone. Stephen had bought Evelyn an expensive white suit as him and Evelyn were going to get married, and he wanted to share this special event with his parents. Margaret and Alan then joined Stephen and Evelyn on their honeymoon. They went to the tropical island of Puerto Galera, but Margaret started to get a bit suspicious and worried by what she saw. She started to notice little things that led her to believe that her son really loved Evelyn, but that love wasn't reciprocated by Evelyn. She said that when Stephen would try to hold Evelyn's hand, she would try to move away from him. Evelyn got pregnant with their first child, Jessica, and then 2 years later, Joshua was born. The family then decided to move from Hong Kong to Angeles City, where Evelyn and Stephen first met. Evelyn was now in a different world. The family rented a house in the most expensive neighbourhood, and Stephen was earning £60,000 a year working as a computer technician. He also gave Evelyn a monthly allowance of £1,000, which is a lot of money considering she was earning £1 a night working in a bar. Stephen also employed maids to do the housework, which meant that Evelyn could laze around all day and get the maids to do everything, including taking care of the children. When Stephen's mother Margaret confronted Stephen about his wife's laziness, he would say, "She doesn't have to do anything, Mum, she's my princess." Stephen did not only change Evelyn's life, he also changed her family's life back in the island. Stephen was sending them a lot of money, enough to enable them to buy a fishing boat and build the only brick house in the village. He paid for them to visit him and Evelyn in their home. Sometimes they stayed for several weeks. When they left, things would go missing from the house, such as light bulb or rice maker. Evelyn was okay with it, and she would just ask Stephen to buy some more. Margaret and Alan continued to visit Stephen and his family at least once a year. They said that Evelyn was acting suspiciously. She would be on her phone texting most of the time, and when nobody was around, she would be heard giggling on the phone. By now, she was always angry with Stephen and hostile towards her in-laws. Her in-laws suspected she was having an affair, but they weren't the only ones. Her sister Gina, who moved in to work as a nanny for the kids, confronted Evelyn about the rumours. Evelyn admitted to her sister that it was true and that she had a lover. She also told her that Stephen and her were having marital problems. The man Evelyn was having an affair with was a local security guard, earning £1,000 a year, and that's the same as Evelyn's monthly allowance. Stephen was also starting to become suspicious about his wife's behaviour. For example, money was going missing. He had given Evelyn money to pay for their daughter's fees to go to a private nursery, only to find out one day when he decided to take his daughter there himself that she wasn't even enrolled at the nursery. Stephen also found out that his wife had pawned her wedding ring. Evelyn was giving money to her lover with which he was able to buy himself a motorbike. Stephen started to spend time away from his family with his single friends. They went to the bars and clubs he used to go to before he was married. His friends said that he would have one-night stands here and there, but that there was nothing more to it. Stephen had told Evelyn he was away on business, but he was actually staying at his friend's house, Mike, where they had girls over and they were partying. Stephen was still trying to make his marriage work, but Evelyn didn't change, so he threatened her with divorce. Stephen decided to stop Evelyn's allowance, which meant she was no longer able to support her family and friends who depended on her. On the 18th of July 2002, Margaret got the news that no mother should get: a phone call from Stephen's friend Mike to tell her that Stephen had died. Stephen and Mike had been staying in Manila at their business apartment when 3 men broke into the apartment, which woke Mike up. One of them held a gun to Mike's head and said, "Is this him?" He was told no by one of the other 2 men. He then went into the room where Stephen was sleeping. Stephen was then heard yelling by Mike, and then 3 shots were fired. The 3 men ran out of the apartment. Mike then went into Stephen's room, felt his lifeless body for a pulse, and there was none. He went to the neighbours and called the police. Mike suspected that this was to do with Evelyn. Margaret flew to the Philippines as soon as she found out about her son's murder. At the funeral, Evelyn avoided her in-laws, which made them suspicious. They said she didn't seem upset at all. The police investigation was moving very slowly. They suspected that someone connected with Stephen's company had killed him. Margaret decided to take matters into her own hands, so she hired her own private investigator, a former policeman who wished to remain anonymous. The investigator did 24-hour surveillance on Evelyn's home and discovered 2 men who paid regular visits to Evelyn. One was Evelyn's lover and the other another security man. Margaret passed this on to the police, who called the men in for questioning. Mike, Stephen's friend, was able to identify them as 2 of the 3 men who broke into his apartment on the night of Stephen's murder. The 2 men were arrested, but Margaret's life was now in danger. However, Margaret wasn't going to leave the Philippines without taking something of Stephen's with her, his children, Jessica and Joshua. Margaret left the Philippines with Stephen's ashes in her luggage, her 3-year-old granddaughter Jessica, but she wasn't able to take Joshua as she hadn't been able to find him. Margaret was still determined to get her grandson over to the UK, who was staying with Evelyn's parents at the time. She sent her investigator to the island with an offer of £200 to hand him over. Evelyn's parents said they cried over giving Joshua over, but they knew he'd have a better life in the UK with his other grandparents. 2 months after Margaret fled the Philippines, she was reunited with her grandson Joshua at Heathrow Airport. She said he was dressed in a pair of men's socks that didn't fit him and a British Airways nappy, but it felt amazing to have Stephen's son in her arms. The children were now living with Margaret and Alan. For 2 years, Margaret worked day and night to prove her daughter-in-law's guilt and her involvement in Stephen's murder. She gathered evidence and even paid police's money to interview witnesses. In total, Margaret spent £55,000. It was Evelyn's relatives who helped Margaret with her investigation. She and Alan had made friends with them whilst in the Philippines, and they kept in touch. Evelyn's brother-in-law, Robin Buttress, who had been acting suspiciously since the murder, and went into hiding when police interviewed him, finally admitted that he was the third man on the night of the murder. Robin said that Evelyn asked him to go with them on the night, but that he didn't know where they were going. He told the police that him, Evelyn, Evelyn's lover and his friend then drove to the flat where Mike and Stephen were staying. The three men went upstairs and it was Evelyn's lover who fired the gun. Evelyn sat in the car to act as lookout. Evelyn had told the men that Stephen was a millionaire and that she would get all his money when he was dead. Robin's confession meant that Evelyn's lover and his friend got convicted of murder and are both now serving life sentences, whilst Robin was set free for giving evidence. In February of 2004, Evelyn was arrested and charged. Evelyn denied everything, but there was strong evidence against her. 14 people gave evidence against Evelyn, including her neighbours who saw her coming home in the early hours of the morning following the murder, when she said she was sleeping at home. Evelyn's father was the only one who visited her in prison whilst she awaited sentencing. The rest of her family turned against her. They also gave evidence that they'd heard Evelyn and her lover planning to murder Stephen for his money. On the day of the sentencing, Margaret and Alan ensured they were in the Philippines. They had waited 2.5 years for this moment. If Evelyn was found guilty, the penalty in the Philippines is a life imprisonment or execution by hanging. At the sentencing, there was no family or friends to support Evelyn, only her lawyer to talk to. Evelyn was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt and sentenced to the maximum life in prison of 40 years without possibility of early release. After the sentencing, Margaret wanted to confront Evelyn with her crimes and say her goodbyes. Margaret told Evelyn that her son and daughter cry for her and they want their mummy. She continued to deny her involvement in Stephen's murder. Margaret then gave Evelyn drawings by her children and photos of happy memories of her family that she lost because of her selfishness and greed. Evelyn broke into tears and told Margaret that Stephen was the best man in her life. Margaret and Alan left the Philippines having got justice for their son, and they continued to raise Jessica and Joshua with love. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button.